of that area, because Dabel has the inhabitants community, that the security is restored. Secondly, Honorable Speaker, those of us who come from the border areas, we have very porous borders. There's influx of arms, contraband, drugs, and also illegal immigrants. But what we are experiencing also is so many roadblocks and checkpoints. Some actually are rent seekers as opposed to for purposes of security. Professor, if the House approves your nomination, what is it that you are likely to do to ensure there is security for Kenya, but also the communities that are traversing or traveling on those roads are not, to an extent, inhumanly disadvantaged? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Professor.
Mr. Speaker, with regard to the question by the Honorable Shrie, it is true corruption is a big cancer in the National Police Service, in the public sector of our country, the 2 levels of government and the 3 arms of government. In our assessment of national security threats that are existential in nature, I have said earlier we have identified 5 existential threats to our country's future. Terrorism and violent extremism is one of them. Banditry and other organized crimes is the second. The third one is the problem of narcotic drugs, psychotropic substances, and all that goes with that. The fourth one is climate change and how it is creating disruption of livelihoods and breeding conflicts among communities. The fifth one is corruption. And therefore, going forward, if I'm reappointed, I am going to escalate programs, policies, and measures to eradicate corruption within the organs of the national security that are within the Ministry of Interior, but also propose for the rest of the country, the rest of the government and public sector, measures that can help us secure the country, because it's no longer an issue of the corruption by the police. It's an issue of corruption being able to actually threaten the country's future. And therefore, corruption is top 5 of our national security threat. Lastly, I've been asked about by the Honorable Didoraso about Hilo. It is true. Hilo gold mine in Dabel, Moyale, we closed in March for 30 days, but we've extended those orders. We have identified that area as a disturbed area because we lost some people there who were fighting over mineral rights, mainly illegal miners who had come, even some of them from other countries. So we closed it on security considerations. We are in talks with the Ministry of Mining to see how an orderly resumption of mining activities can happen. I was there physically in June. I was planning to go back in July before this happened. In the interim, we have lost a few people because of illegal activities around there, even as we speak, on a very low scale though. We even lost 2 police officers in the last 2 weeks. So as soon as if I am approved, as soon as I'm in office, I will prioritize the Dabel issue to ensure orderly resumption of lawful mining activities to the benefit of the communities that are there. With regard to borders, the multi-agency roadblocks we have, especially the one in Archer's Post, the one in in Mombasa, on the Garsen Malindi Highway, all the multi-agency roadblocks are working well, including the Kanyonyo one, the one on Garissa Mwingi, Nairobi Highway. What the criminals have done, those who smuggle arms and aliens and drugs, they are using alternative routes. What am I going to do? The same multi-agency approach that we have used on the main highways. We will increase our surveillance and put multi-agency effort, not necessarily roadblocks, but patrol teams by our special forces on the alternative routes that drug traffickers, human traffickers, and other criminals are using to harm our country. I submit.
Honorable Mule.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, nominee. Honorable Speaker, I want to ask Professor that he came to be the Minister for Interior after the last election and be vetted by this committee and approved, and understanding very clearly the economic policy of the Kenya Kwanza policy of bottom-up economic transformation. You have been in office, and I want to bring you to your attention that the National Assembly put up regulations for private security firms to be regulated properly. And in the view of the better or the bottom up, it was to create employment. But in the time you have been in the office, this industry has suffered tremendous losses whereby you have not given them any regulations. You have not restored order and system in the private sector. And I would wish to know exactly what are you going to do. These private companies have been providing employment to more than almost 1.5 million Kenyans, and they could do better if the government enables proper regulations to create that. And you revoked the license of the Private Security Regulatory Authority, whereby 9 companies plus in this country have not been able to create employment. Are you in the tandem of the idea of creating employment, or making sure that there is no more employment and reducing the tax collection for the government? Because that is in your docket, whereby you need to create environment. And being the last person, Mr. Speaker, I would wish to ask the CS to give us a number of activities he has participated in pro bono work in this country, preview to being a CS or after being nominated as a CS in this country. And last but not least, CS, the issue, I'm the last one, so I just want to give him 10 minutes to respond to me. The nominee, the issue of ID in this country is really, really alarming, especially to the young people who are intending to join institutions of higher learning. And I can assure you, quite a number of them, they are not able to register or for admission in the Institute of Higher Learning. What can you do better to make sure that every young people, and especially the Gen Zs, immediately they are clearing their secondary school, they acquire their IDs at the tail end of their Form 4. Why do we have to wait for them to get out to the field and start struggling to get this opportunity? What collaboration will you do with the Ministry of Education? By the time these young people leave school, they already have an ID. We don't need to wait until they get out here to start struggling. What measures are you going to put if, and I'm using the word if carefully, you'll be approved by Parliament and this committee?
Professor.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the private security regulations emanated from our ministry, of course, were presented to National Assembly for approval. So those regulations themselves speak to the fact that we've been actively involved in generating policy guidance and framework for this very critical sector. In fact, it is my belief, having interacted now with the ministry for 21 months, that the private security, if a little bit regulated in terms of the curriculum and the kind of content those that are recruited there go through, can help us in providing security for some of the private and not so critical installations. And we can vet some of the deserving cases to even be armed, so that instead of having a police officer manning a supermarket or even a bank, sometimes like it happens in Uganda and other countries, you can have very qualified private security people vetted and armed to supplement the work of the police, so that we don't overstretch the national police officers. On the second issue from the Honorable Mule, it is true that the Private Security Regulatory Authority had revoked 9 licenses. The 9 companies appealed to the Cabinet Secretary, and I reversed that revocation in accordance with Section 43 of the Act. So those licenses that were revoked, they were reinstated on appeal. Then the issue of pro bono work. Pro bono work, I understand it to mean unpaid work. That's the understanding of pro bono work from my very limited legal background. I don't know, like which one now, maybe in church or at home or where. Because since I became minister, I have no free time to do anything. I have no time to do anything. I hardly sleep. I hardly have a weekend. Night and day are the same for me. But before then, I used to volunteer in many activities, some organized by Law Society of Kenya, some organized by church organizations, etc., etc. The last question by the Honorable Mule is on identity cards. We have suffered the current discomfort because of court injunctions. That's number 1. Court injunctions for 4 months between last year and early this year, and right now there's even another court injunction. Number 2, we have suffered the disruption because of change in technology from the 2nd generation ID to the 3rd generation ID. And I have explained the need for us to change the technology, because the current ID we have, the 2nd generation ID, cannot be recognized outside this country. It cannot even be a travel document. The security features are very rudimentary, very basic. And therefore the move to new technology, better technology, more secure document has caused disruption. Court injunctions have also caused distraction. And just like passports, in the event that I am reappointed, because the member said he used if deliberately, of course, I also want to promise, if I am reappointed, the same way I have focused on reforming the immigration directorate and helping unclog the passport inefficiency problem, I will focus on IDs and also birth and other citizen documents to ensure that we get optimum results. In fact, for example, a death or birth certificate should be obtained the same day, within 12 hours on application. And perhaps the ID, we should be able again to once we get out of the court injunction, we should be able to retain the 7-day target. At the moment, we are working with 21 days before the injunction.
Thank you, nominee, sorry. Naisula, I didn't want to go another round.
Speaker, I will not, after this nominee, I'll never ask for another round, and it's not a question, it's just a comment, because I'm very passionate about the issues on North Rift, and if the nominee happens to be approved by this committee and the National Assembly, I would like to just say that even as you deal with security matters and the hardware, please remember also peace and dialogue of those communities. Now that there seems to be some semblance of calm, this is the best opportunity to now engage those communities to deal with the stereotypes and also for them to be able to remove the criminals among the communities. Please, in case this committee passes you, approves you, ensure that you have a budget that will help you to engage the communities so that we can deal this issue once and for all. For Shakahola and Kware and all the other issues, we want to see action and not just talk.
Yes.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, for the supplementary one. In conclusion, CS nominee, your appointing authority has considered to the country that one of the failings that the President considered to was lack of communication. You have told us here of very good measures that you have taken in the State Department for immigration, especially in the processing of passports and all that. However, that information is never in the purview of the public, members of the public. And indeed, I have an incident, CS, where a Kenyan in the US called me very desperate that they could not get their passport despite having paid somebody about 20,000 shillings. For a passport was, I think the normal charges are about 4,000 or 3,000 something. And when I followed up the case, the person who was even paid this bribe was not an officer at the Immigration Department, and it took the intervention of the Director General of Immigration, Ms. Evelyn, to get the DCI to hunt for that person. Somebody extorting Kenyans money from Eastlands, pretending to be working in Nyayo House. And therefore, the lack of communication aspect in your ministry is what I want you to address. Should you, or if you are approved, what are you going to do to ensure that there is proper communication to the public so that the public are not taken advantage of by criminals out there in Eastlands and elsewhere who are extorting bribes from Kenyans on the pretext that they are working in Nyayo House? And just like Owen Bayer said, you once declared Nyayo House a crime scene. That crime scene now seems to have moved from Nyayo House to the periphery of Nyayo House and other areas. I would want to hear what specific measures you intend to take to make sure there is proper communication. Kenyans know how much they ought to pay and to who, and so that they are not taken advantage of, because you are also aware that has been very rampant.
Chairman, thank you. Chairman, I just wanted to ask the CS, this issue of the IDs. Professor, you say the IDs will expire after 10 years. Have you put into consideration the vast areas, people like in North Turkana, how far they travel to get IDs? Because IDs are not like passport, they're essential documents that people must have all the time. After, you know, it will be cumbersome for them to go to those centers to go and get IDs. And secondly, on this unrest, you have seen that, as you have said, the IG resigned. But are you aware, in your absence while you are away, we used to have Baba while you are away, but while you are away, that a new IG was appointed?
He's still away, he can't answer that.
No, but that, what is your take? That we were told 60 years, Mr. Speaker, I'm putting it in a better way.
Yes.
We were told when somebody reaches 60 years, he should leave the public service. Are you aware that a new IG has been nominated who's 64 years or 63 years, who has retired, who is being recycled? I don't know what extra thing is going to bring. And my last question is on illicit brews. The Interior Ministry has been accused by the Deputy President of sabotaging the war in illicit brews. Is the war on illicit brews only being waged in Mount Kenya? What aspects of this war are being undertaken in the Interior Ministry? and what is being done by the Office of the Deputy President? How much funds has been used in this war in the last 2 years when you were the Interior Ministry, before you were fired?
Nominee, on the issue of the IG, I direct you not to answer the question because I've received communication from the President nominating the nominee, who will be vetted by a committee of parliament, and those questions can be raised there. If you answer that here, you'll be prejudicing what is coming to parliament. Answer the other questions.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Naisula was a comment. We've taken it on board. Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah's issue was about communication. When I assumed office in October 2022, I began a habit of every 3-4 months updating the country on the status of our homeland security. We've not had one in a while. I had planned one for June, which was postponed and thereafter disrupted. We will use our public accountability updates on security matters to communicate more on what we are doing. And the next, if I am approved by this House, the next public accountability address will feature more on the reforms we have made at Immigration Department, because I think there we've made a lot of success. People concentrate on the banditry thing, but I think also on the passport issue we made a lot of success. Where we still have problems is the IDs and other aspects of citizenship documents. With regard to the ID, the question by the Honorable Junaid Mohammed, the reason for the 10-year limit, there are two reasons. It's actually one reason. It's because of changes in technology. Unlike the ID we have, which has no security features, and therefore it can be timeless. But we'll find a way of making it convenient to the people of Kenya to renew after the 10 years, so that you don't create a crisis by people, and we can do that by even having a phased out renewal process to ensure that again we don't inconvenience masses of people. So the problem is technology and the security features in the 3rd generation ID, which is going to be physical, that is the Maisha card. It is going to be also digital, the digital ID. You can have it digitally. So all those are options for the 3rd generation ID, quite sophisticated in tandem with the current trends in security on identity documents. With regard to the issue raised on Bruce, I would be hesitant to respond to the comment associated with the Deputy President for obvious reasons. But I think, to the best of my knowledge, the Minister of Interior was not cited as frustrating the war. If there are specific officers in the ministry, I think that is something that needs to be looked